thanks for the opportunity to give you an update. We're getting close to the end on the master plan, and we thought it would be a good time to kind of share where we are and kind of the update on where the recommendations are. We still have the business plan for the Monon Center and the ESA as coming forward. Those pieces are we're about 2 months to get those completed, but from the master plan perspective, we wanted to share where we are. So our agenda tonight is talk a little bit about the process, the survey results that were completed, the community engagement findings, some key themes that basically have come forward through this process, strategic action plan, a forward focus, and kind of next steps is what we wanted to share with you tonight. So as you all know, you have a good park system here, one of the best in the country. It's looked at on a national level continually as winning 2 gold medals is a very difficult task for any department, and all of you should be congratulated on because it is very, very difficult to do. So I just want to share that when we move through a process like this, it's all about getting better. It's not like you're not where you need to be, you're at the top. But the challenges that come with being good constantly ask, are we doing the right things and are we doing them right? I mean, that's where we stand in this plan. But what we did and what we've been a part of, and the team of folks and the staff, was we looked at where you are today. So site and facility assessments, the classification of level of park standards. We looked at related plans that you have been approved. Did a full program assessment. We looked at this, did a statistically valid survey. We're going to highlight some of that tonight. An online survey, demographic and trends of where Carmel Clay is headed in terms of population, benchmark analysis. We looked at stakeholder interviews. All of you were interviewed at some point. Then we have the MCC business plan and ESA still in progress. The needs assessment prioritization is what we're kind of highlighting tonight, and the operational review. The park impact fee is still in process. The capital improvement planning, funding and revenue planning, and strategic action plans are written, and part of our discussion tonight is share those. So
And I'll quick interject too, sort of like when we had the Leon and Will at our one workshop last year. We view this as an interactive discussion. So if there are questions, don't wait for the end of the presentation because we've got a lot to cover tonight. Just chime in. I'll interject periodically too when I can contribute and it's appropriate to do so. But again, even though we're in a little bit more formal setting than we were the last time, the intent is for this to be as much a discussion as it is a presentation.
Thanks for that, Michael. Yeah, I appreciate that. So, because we're going to go through some of the survey results that some of you had seen back in the fall, but some of you may not have seen them. So, if there's questions that come up, just do ask, and then we'll get into some of the recommendations that we kind of went through here toward the end of the presentation. But this main part's about kind of the needs assessment portion. So, for those who have not seen it, do feel free to ask any questions. So, our community engagement process, really, it's our philosophy is to go, where the people are. I will say this is our third iteration working with Carmel Clay Parks on this. We had a lot more community engagement this go around than we've had previously, whether it be statistically valid survey, which we've had previously, but we had close to 1,000 survey responses. We had 10 pop-up events. We had focus group outreaches that through our partner, Next Practice Partners, completed, looking at going out to the community and talking to community members that we have not talked to previously. So it was a really, really comprehensive community engagement process. So as I mentioned, 10 pop-up events we did last summer. We had community focus groups with other community groups that we may not have touched on, whether it be school groups, teens, young moms, seniors. We had a statistically valid survey. Our goal was 400 survey responses, and we exceeded that with 412. I'll kind of get in that here in a second. Our online survey, we had nearly 1,000 responses, which was excellent. We do these dozens of these across the country each year, and that was probably the highest we had seen from an online survey response. And then we had stakeholder and staff focus groups, which we had, I think, 35 to 40 one-on-one stakeholder meetings with many of you one-on-one. And then we also had 5 staff focus groups that we did last April. So we looked at it internally and externally on kind of feedback from the community as well as from staff. So I mentioned the intercept surveys. You can see some of the groups of the 10 that we did, these pop-up events, with Asia Fest, Adaptive 5K, the Farmers Market, Carmel Pride, Carmel Fest, Monon Mixer. sensory-friendly swims, prairie trace. We kind of had kind of a cross-section of different types of events to receive some of that feedback. I mentioned the focus groups. These are ones that we kind of touched on that, we did speak with some of these one-on-ones. We also went a lot more into school groups. So we talked to, Prairie Trace Elementary School, Prime Life Enrichment, University High School, Carmel High School, some neighborhood associations, Carmel Moms, Arts Committee. So we just had a really nice cross-section of folks that we talked to in the first, I would say that those all took place last March, April, May, early June is kind of when we had all those last year. So kind of the key themes we heard from the community is like, what are the better ways that we can serve the community? So again, part of that was enhanced facilities and variety. So different ways to kind of look at what are some other types of experiences that we can provide the community, expand events and additional programs, more special needs and inclusivity programs, some improvement to operations and services. We'll kind of get to some of that as kind of on some of the survey responses here shortly. Expanding and diversifying facilities. As always, green space and trail connectivity is always going to be high from what we've heard from the community just historically, and increased engagement in programming, and always to continue to be environmentally conscious with the practices of the department. So I mentioned the statistically valid survey. So it was a 7-page survey that was mailed out last spring. The community could take it online, or they could take a hard copy and mail it back. Our goal was 400, and we exceeded that with 412, which had a plus or minus 4.8% with a 95% level of confidence. Again, we utilized ETC Institute, so many of you have seen some of their surveys in the past, and we're actually able to benchmark them to kind of see how the community, what was different from the last one from 5 years ago. So I'll get into a few of those in a second, but it was nice to be able to benchmark similar questions that we had. So this map kind of shows where the responses came from. So it's a really good cross section of locations of households that took the survey. Of the 412, and we utilized those 6 planning areas to kind of look at how households answered the questions. So the first one is, how important are parks, recreation, services to the quality of life of Carmel? So, 86% believe parks, recreation, and services are very important to the quality of life, which, that's a very, very big number. So that was really great to see. And as I mentioned, we looked at how we asked that 5 years ago. Very important was 85.9% this time, and last time was 73%. So you can see that big jump, which isn't surprising. I know staff and many of you probably have seen the parks are very, very well loved, and I think even since COVID, I think there are more and more people in parks, as well as a lot of the improvements that happen through the impact of the neighborhood parks that went through with the bond previously. And again, that dropped. A lot of that all went up to the very important mark.
And what I like always pointing out about that, 99% of our residents through a statistically valid survey. So we know if we take this survey a number of times within plus or minus 5% almost, we're going to come up with these same numbers. But 99% of our residents said that parks and open space are very important or important. Though that percentage hasn't changed over the last 5 years, but what is really, like Will talked about, very impressive is the strength that very important keeps growing each time we take the survey.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks for adding that. Question 2 was kind of looking at what are the 3 benefits from the list that are most important. So the top 3 really are preserve open space and natural areas, improve physical health and wellness, and provide places for people to enjoy outdoors. Were kind of the top 3 most important to your household. Again, when we looked at this was another benchmark question we looked at was the use of parks and recreation facilities. You can kind of see from 23 to 18, the Monon Greenway jumped up a lot. Central Park did. The MCC kind of dropped a little bit, but I think what's kind of cool is when you look at some of the parks that have been improved, like Meadowlark jumped from like 29% from 8%. Like that just shows the impact of what the improvements to that park kind of had as it related to the usage. So again, you can see all those are very similar there's a couple exceptions, as I mentioned, Meadowlark. And when you look at the rating of the condition of recreation locations, again, over the last 5 years, 71% versus 63% 5 years ago. And again, that jump is really pulling from good. So it's a really speaks to the condition that staff and how much the community looks to the quality of the parks. Now, looking at action items that the households are willing to support, The top three really are acquire new parks and open space, number one. Number two would finish developing the multi-use trail along the White River. And then three is to partner to construct a new center to expand programming for seniors and older adults. And that's the senior one, I would say from 5 years ago, that's kind of been a theme that we heard go around from the community more so than we did 5 years ago. This was related to the MCC and the water park. So as it relates to satisfaction. So if you look at the top three, ways that the MCC hours of operations, their satisfaction level is very high. Selection of fitness equipment at the MCC, and the maintenance and cleanliness of the facility. But if you look at the bottom two, which were kind of interesting, it's the hours of operation, which isn't surprising as that season continues to shorten with the way that the school calendar kind of works. I'm not surprised to see that. And then there's a user experience at the water park was also mentioned as kind of areas that maybe you could see some improvement. Now we're looking at priority ranking. So the way the priority investment rating works, it's going to ask the question two different ways: is how important is a facility or amenity or program, and then how well is that need being met? So it's kind of where does that intersect happen between these two questions. So we asked this for both facilities and for rec programs. For facilities and amenities, the top four were nature trails and boardwalks, canoe kayak rentals, paved multi-use trails, and a canoe kayak launch. And the canoe kayak, those two kind of surprised us, I would say, from the results, but I think that's with the expansion of the White River Greenway, I kind of feel like that's kind of a theme that we're going to see, celebrating nature more and more. But those were two that kind of surprised us when we received the results.
I also think the regional efforts with the White River Vision Plan and just a greater focus on the White River have driven the interest in celebrating and getting into the river and using the river. So, definitely something that we didn't see in our previous surveys 5-10 years ago, ranked really low, but something that's kind of cool to see that that those efforts, those planning efforts, and discussions about the White River are truly paying off. It's probably the first time ever that paved multi-purpose trails wasn't number one.
No, it's great. Yep. And then we looked at for rec programs, wellness, which I'm not surprised is Carmel's a very active community, right? So wellness and health and wellness, that is not surprising to see that number one. Special events and senior specific programs, those are two that kind of percolated the top that I would say was different from what we had seen previously. But again, that kind of follows the theme that we heard both in stakeholder and with focus groups, was the special events and senior specific programs followed by sports, outdoor adventure, arts and culture, nature, environmental, and aquatics.
And one of the things that has always been a theme of the park system almost since its inception is to serve underserved needs in the community, and also a belief that we don't necessarily need to always be the entity that provides every single type of service if there's other service providers out there. So as we get into some of the discussions about the priorities for the future, within this master plan, we'll talk a little bit what's our appropriate role in some of these areas. Maybe we should be involved in them, or maybe we should collaborate with others that are already doing it to ensure that those services are being met. We don't have to be the everything for everyone. We need to make sure that we're doing the things that we do best and then work collaboratively with the others that do things in other areas best.
Madam President, Mayor?
Yes, go ahead, Joshua.
Before you go any further, I'm a little bit curious about the average age of the person who filled out the survey.
Well, you've got to be 18, and you're filling it out as you're answering for your household. Okay. But I will say that the demographics do match the household, that they match the demographics of the city of Carmel. So that is the one thing that statistically valid survey, within 4%.
So can you tell me what the average age is?
We can find it. Yeah, that will tell you the demographics.
Okay. Part of the reason why I'm asking is because senior-specific programming is something that I saw as kind of a trend through here, but that's not relevant to my household. That doesn't mean it's not relevant. I'm just saying, I'm just kind of curious who fills out the survey. And then when you get to the next slide, I mean, I have just really kind of a lot of questions, but I would kind of trying to get an idea before I look at that next slide again. Who's actually answering?
We do have. I mean, we have that full report. With this, it's a highlight. I mean, we went a little deeper on back when we were here in the fall, but all of that's there, and we have 400-page cross-tab analysis that we can also look at too to kind of show where different folks answered, and we actually looked at that via some maps as well to kind of see where the variances were. So, like for instance, I don't have it within this, but the Northeast answered that pretty high,
Yeah.
which is also where the vast majority, the largest majority of the senior population lives.
Northeast.
So
And
that's the
That kind of gets to what I'm trying to get at is that, I'm not certainly not being critical of the idea of senior specific programming, but the example I'm going to use is at one point in time we had like a very small percentage of people asking for pickleball courts, and we were like, it's probably not really relevant.
Yeah.
But we were wrong. But likewise, on the next slide we're going to find that nobody's asking for a skate park. But my guess is that a lot of 8 and 10 and 12 and 15-year-olds didn't fill out the survey to say, hey, our skate park needs an update because when it was built 100 years ago, it wasn't exactly perfect. So that's my line of questioning, that so everybody understands where I'm at.
No, I think those are all fair points, and it's also part of the reason that we don't rely solely on the statistically valid survey, because the statistically valid survey gives us a really good idea of what the voters, if you will, voting age individuals are thinking, which of course drives some of the motivations of our elected officials, which helps drive our funding. But it's the sort of softer, the qualitative mechanisms that we have that reach out to find out what the kids and those that maybe don't participate in this more formal process of providing input. And as a staff, as a consulting team, and as a board, that's where we always, it's paramount upon us not to rely solely on one of these mechanisms, but to look at all the streams of information that are coming in to best understand and prioritize what we do. But very, very valid points. One of the things kind of with the seniors, part of the reason that I think that it also rose higher than what we've seen, just like the White River Vision Plan has driven awareness of the river and the amenities and types of things that you can do with that. This survey was being done in the heat of the election, and there was a lot of discussion about Prime Life and its funding challenges that it has. And there was a candidate forum, at least a couple, I think, focused on seniors. So I think that bubbled up too. It was part of the community's consciousness through the reporting and other mechanisms that even if they didn't have seniors in their household, there was this, well, we've got to take care of that generation as well. So I think that had an impact on some of that rising to a little bit higher. It's just the situational awareness as the survey was going on.
That's a really good question, though, Josh. So, and I totally agree with what Michael said. Like, it's one tool that you've got to use when you look at planning. Whether it's qualitative or quantitative data, it's just what's the right balance and finding that. So, but it's a very, very good question and valid point.
Just a sort of a point of information. I'm fine with you all asking questions as you wish, so please don't ask the chair's permission unless it gets to be midnight.
So again, as we looked at, facility and amenities that are most important to households, the top, again, this is unimportant. So nature trails, boardwalks, paved multi-use trails, aquatic pool facilities, canoe kayak rentals were kind of like the top 4. And again, when we look at that again, that's the important side. Now we look at how well is the need being met. Playground equipment outdoor, that was a huge push for that over the last 5 years with the redevelopment of so many parks. But you really, splash pads, and spray parks, paved multi-use trails, those are all fully met or mostly met. But then when you look down at the bottom, you can kind of see that's where, wakeboard cable park, canoe kayak rentals, therapy pool. So it's kind of balancing what that is. And again, at that cross section is where you kind of see the top priorities. So the high importance or higher unmet needs are those top 3, which is that nature trail boardwalks, which I mentioned, canoe kayak rentals, paved multi-use trails, and canoe kayak launch. And it's not to say that the medium priority are those are things that still need to be addressed, but it's just looking at where the cross section of the importance and the unmet need came from.
And if I can piggyback that is when I guess to the board, if you will, when I look at this list, I think, are there ways that we combine things to make better value? Let me also add, at some point in time, the staff, if you will, came to us and said, hey, we want to put in a flow rider. As far as I know, nobody asked for a flow rider. but it was something that staff was progressive enough to say, hey, this is a great amenity. Likewise, we may look at bocce ball courts and say, well, that's a pretty low priority, but there's a way that we can connect that with off-leash dog park, and now we get kind of a two-for deal. So I hope everybody kind of looks at this list and sees the advantages of trying to combine some of this stuff.
So we also looked at this. I mentioned we had the 6 planning areas. So the PIR, we did this for facilities and amenities, and we also did it for programs. Tonight, I'm just going to kind of show the example. We do have all this data, but we also looked at it by those 6 planning areas and kind of see where there was variances. And Josh, to your point earlier, is like, where does, when we get to programs, where does senior services kind of bubble up? Well, you can kind of tell what planning area where that was higher than some of the other ones. So we did look at this, and it's a long list that we only kind of focused on the top 10 here, but you can kind of we do have all that data kind of broken out, which you'll see later in the report.
And it's one of these things that, again, not the sole means by which we make decisions, and it also, of course, when we're planning for a new park like Bear Creek Park or making major renovations, we do additional master plans or master plan updates and develop those. But these helps us better understand what the needs might be, so that first guess, those first images that we show, are kind of aligned with what we've heard in the past, and then we get additional feedback to say, well, no, or 3 years from now, some things have evolved in the community. There's other priorities. Another pandemic's happened. Whatever it may be, it allows us to adapt. But it does give us a good snapshot on time so that we can focus our energies and our limited resources, whether it's time or financial and space, to hone in where can we get the biggest bang for the buck, if you will.
Michael, what you're not saying, but what I'm also hearing you say is, you made a comment before about the first, second, and third thing that residents in Carmel wanted was more paved multi-use path, and it was like, they had 150 miles of it and they couldn't get enough. People tend to ask for what they know they like.
Exactly.
Right. So I just appreciate the foresight that this staff that you have had to kind of see through the weeds. And I always use the analogy of a buggy whip. When you ask people what they wanted at one point in time, they said they wanted a better buggy whip. I imagine there's enough people in this room that actually know what a buggy whip is, but sometimes you say that and people don't even know what a buggy whip is. What those people didn't know is they wanted to ask for a Tesla, So keep providing the people the Tesla that they don't know they actually want. Thank you.
Thank you.
So again, this is for programs now. Again, same concept. So programs that are most important to households. So special events was number 1, senior specific programs was 2, and wellness was 3, along with sports. We're kind of right in that same zone. And then for unmet need, you could see special events, summer camps were kind of, looked like they were kind of being fully met to mostly met. And you'd see the outdoor adventure, senior specific, adaptive. Those were kind of the 3 bottom as it relates to how well they're meeting needs.
This is where we really start having the conversation. What are our specialties? Where can we do the most effective job? What are our core services currently, and what are, if we're bringing in new services, what are going to most align with our skill set for us to have the success, to look at things in a different way, and maybe to provide that Tesla instead of the buggy whip. And when I look at this list, obviously summer camps, we're doing a decent job. I mean, there's a challenge with childcare that is nationwide and stuff. So that it's not higher is reflective of a national challenge with childcare. But we know from our surveys that we do specifically with our participants that they're very satisfied with our summer camps. If you can get into them, that's the key. Can you get into them? Special events, that's something that for many years the park system has not done. We've sort of turned that over to the city of Carmel as there was an increased focus on the art and design district and city center and driving activity into that evolving and revitalized central core. And that's allowed us to focus our limited resources on that environmental stewardship and something that, here we're seeing increased interest in outdoor adventure and nature education and stuff. So, it tells me that if we focus more attention on those things that we know that we can do very well, that we're experts in, that we can, and looking at those in innovative ways, we can make a huge impact, and we're probably well positioned to do so. And we may be the best entity within the community to do that type of education or those type of programming. For special events, I see that as an opportunity to work with the city. We moved some of our special events out of West Park, out of River Heritage Park, because at the time that we were doing them, like the kids' concerts, was the time that these devices were starting to get a little bit more popular, and social media was getting popular, and our marketing team was effective at pushing people to our parks, and then our parks were overloved, and we were destroying the parks by having special events. So it made it a real easy decision. Let the city do it in a different space that's maybe better, has the capacity to do it. Now the way that I look at information like this and discussions that we'll have is, okay, I'm not advocating for us to necessarily get back into the planners of special events, but maybe there's an opportunity to work with the city's community relations department and marketing department to create some event experiences in our parks that are designed understanding the capacity of the parks and stuff. So I actually reached out to the new marketing and communications director today to start engaging that conversation. I also shared these results and surveys with her as well, so that they can, because there's information that, again, we're doing the survey, but this information can be beneficial to not just us, but other providers within the community. So lots of opportunities, and sort of my re-emphasis to say that we don't have to be everything for everyone. We have to find the right way to when appropriate, be the leaders, and when appropriate, be the ones that help to connect the dots so that the right organizations are serving our residents in the way that needs to be done.
So again, going back to the priority investment rating. So again, looking at importance, unmet need, wellness, yoga, special events, senior specific, sports, outdoor adventure, arts and culture, nature, environmental, and aquatics were all kind of in that top tier as it relates to programming. So key themes. This is kind of this is what we heard qualitatively and from quantitative from the survey. So key themes from the community: special events and senior programs were a higher need. And then I would say evaluate appropriate role for CCPR as it relates to delivery of those services, and to look to address this through enhanced collaboration, as Michael mentioned previously. Outdoor adventure opportunities was very high. Activation of the White River, whether that be through canoe kayak launch and rentals, or whether it be the White River Greenway, other ways to kind of activate the river.
And I think this is one of those areas where we have the greatest opportunity to look for unique ways to serve it that are beyond just things that we measured in the survey or heard specifically in the qualitative data. Outdoor adventure is a very broad subject, so I think that could be, if it's agreed upon priority of the park board, that we start imagining that of what the possibilities could be.
Other ones were connectivity. So again, as we just mentioned, the White River Greenway completion, nature and paved trails throughout. I mean, trails are always going to be a top priority in Carmel. They've been the last 15, 20, 25 plus years. Other things we had heard was capacity and overcrowding at facilities, whether that be, as we mentioned, some summer camps or at the NCC or water park.
And we'll talk. That was a point of discussion at our workshop that we had too, and some of that is reality, and some of that is perception. And we talked about some of the drivers of that. So one of the things that we are doing, and we have a meeting set up within the next week or two with the chief of police. We're adding 2 park resource officers that were funded through the general fund budget approved by City Council last year for this year. So we'll be looking to add those that help to address some of the overcrowding. Was some of the themes behind that were a sense of safety or security. Not that people didn't feel. There were many people that feel safe based on the visitation numbers, but there was a emerging theme that some people felt that they didn't feel as safe as they maybe once did. So looking at how can we do that, making sure that our residents, finding that right balance to ensure that our residents are able to enjoy our facilities, but we have enough visitation to our facilities, the water park specifically, the Monon Community Center specifically, that we're also achieving cost recovery. Because we know from our history that if we target solely or we price solely to attract our residents alone, that we're probably not going to be successful at achieving cost recovery, which means then the taxpayers have to subsidize our operations. And it remains a clear message, at least from our elected officials, that there's not a strong desire to subsidize the Monon Community Center and the water park. But at the same time, there is a strong desire to ensure that our residents feel welcome and have the opportunity to use the facilities. So those are the things that we're looking at, the intersection of where can we do some things that are friendly towards our residents, but not such a distraction to our guests, to the community, that we continue to drive cost recovery, but also to drive visits and people coming to Carmel, because many of those individuals that come to Carmel for the water park don't just spend money at the water park, but they use our other businesses, so we become an economic driver for the greater community. So it's all part of the balancing path that this board is very well aware of over our history, and one that we'll continue to have to focus on. But as that facility becomes increasingly popular, as neighboring communities, especially Indianapolis, don't have all their pools online, it just drives more visitation to our facilities. And how do we find that appropriate balance to ensure that our residents who helped invest in the infrastructure feel satisfied with what we're doing too?
So other ones, long-term funding solutions. So that's one that, we've kicked that around the last couple iterations, but whether that be park impact fees, reach the park system, what's the correct role of the foundation? I know, just trying to understand ways to engage that and to activate the foundation, maintaining what the department owns and ensuring that it is well kept. I mean, that's a high priority from the community, and obviously the department's done a very, very good job of that historically. And then park development. So the west side, we know, finishing and implementing Bear Creek Park is a priority that we've kind of heard from the community, and we'll get to it here in a second as it relates to action items, but one that we kind of see needs to be over the next 5 years a main priority. So
now we get to the fun stuff, because a lot of that is information that many of you have heard in different renditions over the last year. Now we're talking a little bit about the vision for the future and what are some of the driving themes. So this is where I really need you to give us your feedback, because while yes, this is a plan that is driven or developed in close coordination between staff and pros consulting and our consulting team, it is ultimately the park board that is the driver of the vision for the department, because you're the representatives of the community. So don't be shy in this section. Yeah, not that you have been.
Do chime in if you have any questions. So the action plan, we met last month with Michael and the executive team and kind of outlined what do we do with all this information? How do we outline it and priority? And really, we followed these three guiding principles to kind of build the recommendations, kind of all flow from these three guiding. So enhance park and recreation opportunities within the community, provide exceptional customer service experiences, and ensure the long-term sustainability of the park and recreation system. So these three kind of guiding principles, all the other recommendations kind of fall within these three buckets.
And that shouldn't sound unfamiliar, because those are the same guiding principles that we have for the current comprehensive master plan. We had a lot of discussion about, should these change, but we felt that this one, they're still relevant. They are the mechanisms by which we actually evaluate our staff and formulate our divisional goals and individual goals, and they've worked really well for us. And we decided, the things that fall under them, the goals and objectives that fall under them, need to evolve, but the actual guiding principles are as relevant today as they were 5 years ago. Honestly, this is about the same principles we had 10 years ago too. It's a proven thing, as long as everything that falls underneath them also evolves with time.
That's great. So I'm going to go through, there's three maps here, and we kind of wanted to we have a lot of maps within the planning process, but we wanted to first start with look at the three different planning areas. We looked at west, central, and east. These maps kind of show public entities that are within each of the planning areas, and then a 10-minute walk time to them. So, and really to kind of see, we look at this, and many of you have seen maps previously when you looked at population density as it relates to service area. This one's just looking at purely 10-minute walk time. So on the west side, you can kind of see that there is some gaps over there, but the central core on the right side, I would say you're also kind of seeing that, you also have the Monon Greenway runs right through there. You've got a lot of other trails. There's a lot of coverage that have happened there over the last 5 to 10 years that really in that urban core. So we want to kind of look at it, we've looked at drive time before historically, but we want to really look at a 10-minute walk on what that would look like in the 3 planning areas.
And one of the things that's important to look at, again, we looked at not just our properties, but school properties, dad club properties, things that serve park and recreation needs within the community. But like when you look on the west side, Bear Creek's on there, but it's not online yet. So it looks a little bit more fuller there in that northwest corner, but we know in reality it's not truly serving the community yet. So some of this is aspirational. When you look in the central and the east sides, though, most of those things are built out with the exception of Thomas Marcaselli Nature Park and the White River Greenway. And you can see that and this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone because we've known that we've only had for the longest time West Park on the west side of the community with Cox Hall Gardens for a county park and then the recent acquisition of Bear Creek Park. We know the west side's been underserved. We know that the east side has always been better served because we were fortunate to get more property in the early days of it. And with the Monon Greenway and the assets that we have in the central part of the city, there's been a lot of investment, both from the park board, from the city, and from others within that central core, and that's well demonstrated in this 10-minute walk now.
Any questions over that methodology this go around? All right, so the first guiding principle was enhance opportunities. So, we kind of started, there's 6 of these, but acquire additional parks and natural areas throughout the community, especially in underserved areas. Expand trails, river access, and environmental education along the White River corridor, and facilitate the implementation of the West Regional Corridor. So, as Michael mentioned, that would be, implementation of Bear Creek Park. Develop coordinated vision plan for the central core. So we looked at that central core 10-minute walk time, but I know Michael wants to even go a little deeper into that over the next 5 years and do a vision plan as it relates just to the central core. Develop an environmental education facilities and programs, and seek innovative solutions to serve identified underserved and underserved populations within the community. Now, second guiding principle is provide exceptional experiences. So continue to reimagine existing parks through effective planning and appropriate updates. Create nature preserve experiences throughout the park system. Provide a diverse selection of facilities and amenities to accommodate indoor and outdoor recreation pursuits. And balance and expand program opportunities throughout the community. Following up on that, balance and expand volunteer opportunities throughout the community. Evaluate long-term opportunities for revenue facilities. This goes back to whether it be the recreation facilities or the ESC summer camp programs, but look for ways to reinvest in those, whether that be through additions or replacements. Attract and retain high-quality employees, and examine internal and external communication efforts as it relates to marketing.
And those last 2 are ones that are based on some internal just discussions. We've discussed for many years, even when Mark was director, it's always been our goal, and it's an ever-striving goal because our workforce is ever-changing, but we want to be an employer of choice. We want to be a place that people want to work, whether you're a Parks and Recreation professional, you're a child care professional for extended school enrichment, whether you're a lifeguard that just needs a part-time job or anything in between. So we want to make sure that we are doing those things to be an employer of choice, terms that I use, but that's what I mean by that. And that helps us attract and retain those quality employees. And we've worked very extensively with our staff. We've formed over the last several years a culture committee The idea of that is the culture of our workforce culture is what's meant by that. And it's a group of volunteers, of our employees that have formed the committee that are coming up with ideas to engage and ensure that we're providing meaningful experiences for our employees. Everything from having volunteer opportunities that we can do as a team. Does not mean that every single employee does it, no, but a significant amount of employees have identified things that they want to do. It can be activities, game nights, a book club, walking club, variety of different things. Again, so that as an employer, it's just not coming to work, but there's opportunities that if you choose to engage further with your coworkers because you spend so much time with them, there's those opportunities, and it's welcome to all of our employees, regardless of full-time or part-time seasonal status. Also, things like looking at our uniform. We had a ad hoc uniform committee. We've had a uniform policy in place for many, many years, a policy that's now been emulated by park systems around the country, including Portland, Oregon. But preferences in dress and we again wanting to make sure that we attract the and retain employees. We listened to our employees and made some tweaks to the types of things that are acceptable, added some different types of uniform components that were requested that again are very well received. Our culture committee also came up with that environmental focus with uniforms. We have a swap day, so some of us have extensive collections of uniforms that we don't use all the times because we can get new components, or our body shapes change over time and stuff. So, or people when they leave don't necessarily want to just throw things away. So we collect them and once a year have a trade-off where staff can basically trade uniform components and have a free garage sale, if you will, with those. That has been well received. So that's just a small representative example of the things that we've done, but I wanted to make sure that this master plan reflects that from all levels, from park board to executive management, that it's well documented that we have that commitment to our employees and want to continue to look at those opportunities and listen to our employees to ensure that we are achieving that goal of being an employer of choice. And the communication, again, external communication, making sure the public knows what we're doing. Like there's in the Central Core, for example, one of the higher priorities was a need for fishing. Well, Meadowlark Park has one of the best stocked ponds in the state of Indiana. It's in the urban DNR's urban fishing program. So that's a place where we use the information to understand. Okay, there's some messages that aren't getting through, or messages that we can focus on. But again, making sure our employees too know what's going on, both going up and down. So. Again, we wanted to make sure that that was something that was specifically identified so that our employees, from the input that we heard internally, is being reflected, not only for serving the community, but serving our employees.
And the third guiding principle is ensure long-term sustainability. So again, some of that's due to funding. So develop long-term funding plan for the next 5 years, and what is that going to look like? So we looked at some other options as it relates to that.
Exactly, and I've been working with Brian and his team to actually we just got the latest draft of some things that state law are very specific about what parks can do, as well as building off some of the ideas that PROS has provided of things that we can do legally, and whether or not they're feasible because of circumstances, maximum tax levies of our fiscal bodies, for example, or have they been implemented? Things that maybe require others to play nice with, to be able to get the funds with, or may even require legislative action to enact. So we're working on developing that, but we know. We've been discussing this forever. The park impact fee issue has just exacerbated and further highlighted the challenges that we have. We've known since the day that we issued the Central Park bond that local income tax would be an important funding source for us, but that was a finite funding source, and that is rapidly coming to an end. The bond is paid off on January 15th, 2025, and that will have significant impacts on the composition of this board based on the current interlocal, but more importantly, also significant ramifications on our financial capacity to implement anything in this plan. I mean, honestly, this is the most fundamental thing that's a goal within the current proposed comprehensive parks and recreation master plan. Because if we don't get this right, the plan's not worth the paper it's written on, because it becomes next to impossible, especially for the capital assets, to be able to implement much of anything. So not to sound alarming, but quite frankly, it is something that is alarming that we have to address. We know we have to address. I know there's strong dedication with the park board. I believe there's strong dedication with the council, with the township boards, Mayor Finkum, Trustee Hansel. We just got to get it figured out. And, you know, this is the year to get it done.
The second one is continue to expand conservation management practices throughout the park system and expand environmental education opportunities for park stewardship, or it could be through just in general for the community enjoying natural resources. And the fourth and fifth are line business practices to achieve 100% cost recovery for the Recreation Facilities Division and the ESE Summer Camp Schools Division. And then utilize, go ahead.
And I'm going to jump in on that too. That's why we felt it was very important in the current, as part of the current comprehensive master planning process, to develop a updated or new business plan for the Monon Community Center, and develop really the first ever business plan for ESE and summer camps. I mean, not that they haven't been guided. ESE has definitely been guided by business principles, but to actually put it in a business plan format. The current business plan for the Monon Community Center was adopted the year that Rich joined the board, 2010. So again, not that we're not implementing business practices, we very much have, and we've adapted and moved beyond that. But we need to make sure that we have a roadmap for the park board, for executive management, for our team, and for the community to understand what we're doing in the present and the future to ensure that those business operations functioning through Carmel Clay Parks and Recreation remain successful.
Great. And then the final one for this is to use key performance indicators, or KPIs, to drive data-driven decisions regarding services and operations. I know Curtis and I have been going back on some ways to maybe look at, and Eric, on ways to look at MCC utilization as it relates to membership retention, on what's best practices that are out there. And it's a unique facility with the water park in the summertime, but it's trying to kind of give them some KPIs that kind of track as it relates to membership retention for those. So that's just an example. Other ones are some marketing communication ones that we worked on with Chilling. So.
And then this brings us to, this is a term we use for the current comprehensive master plan, and we sort of landed on, based on the themes, the information that we've received from the public, the general goals is our forward focus, the top 4 goals for the new planning period. So take it away.
Yeah, so not surprising, number 1 is long-term funding. So again, secure dedicated funding sources that are not already used. Protect use of impact fees for park and recreation infrastructure, and to renegotiate the interlocal agreement between the city and the township. So I know that's kind of been our number 1 theme that we've talked about this evening as it relates to the action plan, but any questions as it relates to that in the forward focus? Okay, and the second one is the White River Corridor. So celebrate, protect Carmel's most significant natural resource, complete the White River Greenway and trail connections to make that a completed system, leverage opportunities for outdoor adventure, whether that be through expanded partnerships or other community members that can help leverage that, and collaborate with partners to enhance stewardship in the regional ecosystem, which those two are kind of tied together as it relates to the White River Corridor, but working collectively to figure out what's the right way to activate the river. The third is the West Carmel Green Space. So again, that's implement and work on the Bear Creek Master Plan over the next 5 years, and continue the development of West Park and the remaining recommendations that are in that master plan, and secure additional parkland and or help preserve natural areas. As you saw with some of the maps earlier, that was the west side is still an area that can be enhanced as it relates to additional green space.
And that's a heavy lift. Again, you have to have financial resources for that to occur. But this might be an opportunity. We talked about working with the foundation. We have our Carrie, our resource development coordinator. Working with the new mayor, looking at those opportunities. Maybe there are some abilities to leverage those different entities to get some land trust or life estates. Again, big dreaming, no guarantees for any of those, but I think we need to look at all those options. Not that we haven't been, but we have more resources available to us to have a more concentrated focus on ways to make the preservation or additional acquisition of additional parkland possible. And we talk about West Carmel because that's the area of greatest need. But there's also an asterisk that says if there's opportunities in other parts of the community, we should explore that too. Because definitely in this election season and through all of our mechanisms of getting input, our residents want more open space. They want more green space. They want more parks. And that's a challenge in a community that's there's not a lot of open land that is out there. So how do we get more creative at preserving the lands, whether it's entitled by Carmel Clay Parks and Recreation, whether it's continuing to work closely with the city for natural preservation areas as developers are eating up the last developable spaces. But definitely something our community wants.
And the fourth, but this is kind of a unique one that we heard from the community in the needs assessment portion, but achieve more through effective collaboration. So as we mentioned, whether that be through special events or senior programs, or again, how do we work on as Michael mentioned, we're the goal to create a green space vision plan over the next 5 years for the central corridor. So what will that look like? It's going to require a lot of different collaboration with different partners to make that a reality. And again, as it relates to recreation services for special events or for senior programming. Any questions over that? That's kind of, any questions just in general on our process and where we are or anything?
Thank you, Will and Leon. Any further questions at this point from board members? Michael, would you just remind us what the process is?
Absolutely.
Now?
So one, we wanted to make sure that those guiding principles and the strategies that we put under them and discussed tonight are appropriate and things that as a department, as a park board, we are in alignment that those are appropriate. There'll be additional strategies that go underneath that, but we want to make sure that we've got these bigger focuses in alignment before we hone in further on the written report. To also to pay special attention to the forward focus, because that's where the major energy is extended on all of it. But when it comes to there's 1 hour left and you can only do one thing, we're going to be looking at this list first. So we need to make sure that we're in alignment with that. We will, if that's an agreement, what we will ultimately do, they'll work on the draft report. We'll make sure that the park board gets a copy of that so that you can start reviewing that. We can ensure that there's an appropriate process for discussing that, whether that's providing us information, or if we do a workshop we can discuss once we get that report how best to do that. But also an important next process will be a joint meeting with the city council and township board, because as the fiscal bodies and the long-term funding, we need to make sure that if we're in agreement on the park side, but our fiscal bodies are completely disagree with everything in it, then again, it's a plan that's not worth the effort that we're putting into it. So we need to make sure that there's alignment and buy-in from our elected officials before it ultimately comes back to the park board for adoption. And then it also serves as the groundwork and hopefully facilitates those discussions that we need to have regarding long-term funding, regarding the renegotiation or adaptation of the interlocal agreement, which is effectively becoming obsolete on January 15th, 2025, of continuing those discussions on the park impact fee and ensuring that those concerns that we have are adequately and appropriately addressed. But we'll have that meeting and get their consensus as well. Provide similar. It'll be a higher level meeting similar to what we're having. But again, I want to make sure that the park board is on the same page before we have those discussions with the elected officials, because if we don't have agreement, then it'll be hard to have those conversations.
Any other comments or questions from the board members at this time? So comments can be submitted all along.
Absolutely. This is
okay.
an ongoing process. So, you've already been given a copy of this presentation via email. If you didn't receive it, let us know, and we can make sure that you have it or print it out. Look it over. There's a lot of information that was presented tonight. So if you have ideas, if you have concerns, things that pop up, reach out to me. Also happy to put you into contact with the pros team if you want to have discussions with them to get their perspective on things too. So that dialogue is open for.
And before he departs, I want to recognize the Carmel Clay Park Foundation Board President. Dan Dutcher is in our audience tonight. So thank you for being here to watch the presentation.